Declan Kearney, National Chairperson for the Sinn Féin Ireland. Thanks for joining us today.
You're very welcome. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you, dear Declan. First of all, I would like to ask about the Sinn Féin movement's developments. Can you give us a very brief history and struggle of the Sinn Féin, first of all?
Yes, the Sinn Féin party is committed to the reunification of Ireland and the achievement of national democracy and self-determination. In the course of recent decades, Ireland has come through a very intense war. This has been the reality in Irish society for many centuries because our country has been the victim of colonialism, and that has continued through until the present day. At the turn of the 20th century in 1921, the island was divided by the British state. Ireland was partitioned. And as a consequence of the partition of Ireland, a northern state was formed. It was a one-party state based upon sectarian discrimination, apartheid, inequality and injustice, and brutal repression. And as a consequence of many attempts to change the status quo, and then finally to democratically and peacefully reform the state, a military insurgency commenced. And that continued for several decades up until the Irish peace process came about. And that led directly to a peace settlement in 1998. And the peace settlement is known as the Good Friday Agreement. And importantly, within the Good Friday Agreement, there is a provision for the exercise of national self-determination. This is the first opportunity, would be the first opportunity, that the people of Ireland, since we were divided by British rule, to determine our own future destiny. This provision within the Good Friday Agreement has not yet been exercised. And Sinn Féin today has developed as the largest party on the island of Ireland. We lead the political opposition in the Irish Parliament based in Dublin. But as a consequence of the Good Friday Agreement and the new political institutions premised upon power sharing that were established, there is a power sharing executive in the 6 northern counties, and Sinn Féin leads the power sharing coalition. So our party is stronger than at any time before in our history, and the momentum for Irish reunification has developed to an extent where this has now become the defining issue in Irish politics. And our party has set as a concrete political objective the achievement of self-determination referendum before the end of this decade.
Thank you so much, dear Declan. The brief history was very putting light on the Sinn Féin. Secondly, would like to ask that the Kurds have always taken the Irish people's struggle for freedom as an example. So, what are the similarities between these two communities? Very shortly, please.
What I think draws out parallels between Ireland and many other countries, and including that of Kurdistan, is the fact that our people and our country have been colonized. We've been subject to imperialism and British colonial rule. Today, we still do not have Irish national independence. I think that we are closer to Irish independence than at any stage before, but nevertheless, the journey is not yet complete. And similar to other struggles, we have come through bloody warfare, and we have faced into the need then to bring about peaceful conditions. So we have come through a process of peace building, intensive negotiations, leading up to the agreement of Good Friday in 1998. But as a result of the peace settlement being established and the political institutions, the power sharing political institutions, and the All Ireland political institutions that run in parallel to the power sharing institutions in the 6 northern counties, negotiations have continued on many issues. While we have had a peace settlement, it is not a political settlement. And as a result, there have been periods since 1998 in the north of Ireland where there has been intensive political instability. And these situations have only been able to be addressed and resolved through negotiation. So while we had a very key watershed negotiation leading to the Good Friday Agreement in 1998, there have in fact been as many as 8 to 9 other phases of negotiations and talks from 1998 right up through until recent years. And I think that is an experience that it can be shared with other countries which have yet to arrive at a peace settlement and who are directly involved in the pursuit for national self-determination. So there are parallels in relation to peace building, conflict resolution, and also negotiation as a site of struggle. I should also add that one of the huge disruptors for our peace process, which led to unprecedented political instability in recent years, was the onset of Brexit, when the British state pulled the north of Ireland out of the European Union against the democratic will of the citizens who voted in that referendum to remain within the European Union. And the impact of Brexit has been economically quite catastrophic and challenging for both the north of Ireland and the island economy, which is one of the great success stories of our peace process. But it also had the effect of sweeping away all of the previously established constitutional and political and economic assumptions about the status quo here in the north of Ireland.
You, dear Declan. So also to make it a bit more deep in the conversation, I would like to ask the experiences of the negotiations. So the Northern Ireland question has been experienced in Britain for many years, as you mentioned. They reach a peaceful solution and the deaths have stopped. Similarly, Öcalan has been calling for a dialogue for years to resolve the problems in Kurdistan. So, in the light of your experience in Ireland, what are your suggestions for a peaceful solution to the problem in Kurdistan?
First of all, no two struggles are ever the same. And it would be inappropriate for myself in an Irish context to prescribe an approach which should be taken by the people of Kurdistan in the context of advancing their struggle for national self-determination and also creating the conditions for peace. But I do think that there are established transferable principles which are universally accepted in the context of building peace and effecting conflict resolution. And I believe that starts with an acceptance by all parties who will become involved in the negotiations that there can be no preconditions. Therefore, everything must be on the table. All sides must be involved. There should be complete inclusion, and no one should be excluded from the peace talks. And then critically, all sides must approach the talks process and the negotiations in absolute good faith. Therefore, when decisions are made, they must be honoured. When decisions are made, they must be implemented. There can be no backsliding and there can be no bad faith. This will create a setback for the process. We should also remember, of course, that uh, building peace and conducting peace negotiations are incredibly challenging because while all sides must be at the table, it doesn't follow that all sides, particularly state actors, will be monolithic in the perspective that they bring. So there may well be divisions in thinking and tensions among state actors who may well be involved in the process of negotiation. And this must be taken into account as the process or the table of negotiations is commenced. But in our experience, no preconditions. Everything must be on the table. Everyone must be at the table. And then all sides must participate in a good faith basis with an absolute commitment to making progress and ensuring that whatever is agreed is implemented and within the agreed timeframes.
Thank you, Declan. That was one of my other questions, but just because of you underlined it, I would like to ask it now when it's on time. As you mentioned, the all sides needs to be on table. The peace seeker Öcalan is now under isolation and still not being able to see his lawyers to give the message to the outside world. How does that gonna work? Do you think Öcalan has the right to be free and freely talk and take his place on that negotiations table? Can you evaluate that very shortly? Would be okay.
Yes, I think it's essential that Öcalan is at the table and that he is a full participant in any potential talks which may take place in the time ahead. Clearly, at this point in time, there are optimistic signs. I'm very pleased to note that for the first time in many, many years, he had the opportunity in October to meet with family members. And since then, uh, political delegations have been given permission to meet directly with him. So these are positive indicators. But as yet, there is no confirmation, of course, that peace talks are on the horizon. But perhaps, just perhaps, there is a process beginning which is inching towards the development of a negotiation table. And it may well be, and if this is so, it is to be welcomed, that there are slow moves being taken to prepare the ground. I hope for Öcalan's release, but also for discussions to take place on the convening of a talks table. And it may well be the case that there is a lot of discussion and a political talks phase which is required to clear the path to officially inaugurating comprehensive peace negotiations. Certainly, that would have been the case in South Africa, and I don't want to draw out a direct parallel here at all, but if you reflect on what happened in South Africa, Nelson Mandela, uh, over a period of time, was prepared for release. There was direct engagement with Mandela. The regime, the apartheid regime, allowed for communications to take place with him. And then finally, Mandela was released well in advance of the political and the peace negotiations that finally developed in South Africa, happily then opening the road to national democracy in that country. So I think that it's very important that crucial political leaders are involved in the process. And clearly, in the case of Abdullah Öcalan, as he remains incarcerated, I think the case is clearly to be made, and it is a necessity that he should be released, and he should be released into a new political context, which is preparing the way for final peace negotiations.
Thank you, dear Declan. Also, would like to ask you, once I find you, your comments are very valuable for us as well. So, the role of the Britain as well. So, what role is played by the UK political system in the conflict on Middle East as well as in Kurdish question? But if you can keep that very short answer as well, there is many other questions would like to talk to you.
I think that conceivably Britain has a role to play. The issue of Kurdistan is a very significant geopolitical issue, given the location of Kurdistan and the number of immediate and adjacent state actors who have had an involvement with the conflict over the course of recent decades. You ask about Britain, and I said conceivably it may have a role, but I think fundamentally the real negotiation which must take place is between the representatives of the Kurdistan people and the Turkish government. What I would say about other international actors is that if they are to have a role, it must be on an agreed mandated basis. It must also be one of good faith. It must be one where there is no partisan role taken in support of one side or another. So it must be even handed, independent, and neutral.
Thank you so much. Another question is, what were the prominent problems in the negotiations process that the British state conducted with you, with Ireland? So, what would you recommend to be considered in particular in the dialogue and negotiations program, progress?
Firstly, the British government had to be persuaded that there was a need for a peace settlement in Ireland. That was a political obstacle. And we successfully overcame that difficulty as a result of other, much more positive international actors intervening and then having the effect of influencing the British state, the British government then. The Irish government recognised that it had to have a role, but the critical international player in the resolution of the Irish peace process, the achievement of the Irish peace process, was in fact the United States of America. Uh, there is a very substantial Irish American diaspora across North America, and the diaspora was mobilized by Sinn Féin and others in support of the achievement of peace in Ireland. And it had a direct bearing upon the thinking of the then Bill Clinton administration. And to be completely fair to the role played by Bill Clinton's government and successive American administrations, they engaged directly with the British and encouraged the British to become involved in the peace process. And the Americans played a very even-handed and fair role over the initial period of the peace process to ensure that we got to the point of the Good Friday Agreement. And they've played a constructive role in the years since, because the Good Friday Agreement, even so many years on after its establishment in 1998, has still not been fully implemented. So that there's an important lesson that even in the Irish context, notwithstanding the success of our peace process, and the US government, I think, would look upon the Irish peace process as probably being one of its most successful foreign policy initiatives, arguably since the Marshall Plan in the aftermath of World War II. But the Americans have played a constructive role, and international actors, I think, have to follow that type of lead. And that is what is applicable in relation to Turkey and Kurdistan. Other international players must be prepared to act with an even hand and in good faith. The objective must be to ensure that a democratic peace is achieved and that the rights of the people of Kurdistan are upheld, and that you move forward as a result of a successful peace process to a effecting peaceful coexistence between Turkey and the people of Kurdistan on the basis of national self-determination.
Thank you. So there is a role of Europe as well. Would like to talk to you about it. Why does the European Union have a cold approach to a peaceful solution to the Kurdish issue? There are also established opinions that the British state does not want a Turkish Kurdish peace in the Middle East. What is your assessment in this context? But very shortly, that one as well, please.
I should also say that the European Union played a role in the Irish peace process, and it was positively engaged in the achievement of the Good Friday Agreement. And in fact, as a result of the Good Friday Agreement, then committing to successive tranches of European funding that were critical in actually underpinning the implementation of the agreement. So, to your question in relation to Europe and the issue of Kurdistan and national democracy being achieved on behalf of the Kurdish people, the European Union is not monolithic, and whatever about the perspective that is reflected by the institutional leadership of the European Union, perhaps at the level of the European Commission. I do not think it is the case that the view or the attitude displayed by the European Commission is reflective or representative of wider European opinion, both political, institutional, and civic. So that's why I indicated earlier in my opening remarks that no institution and no government, no state actor should ever be seen as monolithic. As to why the European Commission or others within the European elite take an adverse approach to the issue of Kurdish national self-determination, clearly that is tied up with geopolitical alliances and interests and security and economic priorities that elements within the European Union will espouse. But what is required is to engage with all of those actors within the European Union to ensure that they accept and uphold, recognize that there is a need for an implementation of international humanitarian law in Kurdistan, and that the Kurdish people are entitled to be underwritten by the UN Charter, just as the UN Charter is used to underwrite the rights of citizens elsewhere in our world.
Thank you, dear Declan. Also, let's continue with the first message from Kurdish leader Mr. Abdullah Öcalan. As you know, he's been visited by two pro-Kurdish DEM party representatives, and his first message to outside was very clear and to the point. If the ground is prepared, I have enough power to bring conflict to the peaceful negotiations table, he said. How do you evaluate this message first? How important it is, and also the Öcalan proves that he is on the peace side and looking for a peace. How would you like to comment on that very shortly, very briefly? That one as well. We have
Allow me
few
to
more
pick up on
questions.
your allow me to pick up on your last point first. I think that it is clear, going back as many as 15 to 20 years, that Öcalan has declared for peace, that he has made clear his willingness to support the development of a peace process. And clearly, the most recent remarks are a reiteration of that. He has an obvious role to play in bringing about a negotiations table. And I believe that if there is to be a process of political talks leading to comprehensive peace negotiations, then Öcalan must be at the table.
Thank you, thank you. Pro-Kurdish Dem Party representatives, as they visited Öcalan, as you know, but the Turkish government still applies the isolation harshly on Öcalan, and lawyers or family visits to him is not allowed yet. In Turkey, the main headlines now is the visits to Öcalan, but how is it possible to talk about the peace? This is the question I asked earlier, but would like to make this more clear and more to the point. While Abdullah Öcalan is under isolation, how does that going to work? In this frame, how do you see that, and what is your call to break this isolation on Öcalan, to create the healthy, peaceful peace negotiation table? Very
Uh,
shortly can be that one.
my appeal would be to the government of Turkey to embrace the challenge and the opportunity of peace, finally, with Kurdistan. And in doing so, then it should recognize that there are going to be incremental steps which must be taken to prepare that ground. There is a saying in Ireland that peace comes dropping slowly. And I think this is a true reality, certainly of our experience and in other places. But if the government of Turkey is now at the point of inching closer to a decision to engage in a peace process, then that must be encouraged and supported. And I believe if the government of Turkey arrive at that political conclusion, and that is the right thing to do, this would be the right decision to take, and it would be universally applauded, in my view, were it to do so, then there are logical political steps that should follow from arriving at that point. One of which would be the release of Öcalan and working with him and others within the Kurdistan struggle for independence to prepare the context and then open the pathway to political talks as a prerequisite for opening up a comprehensive peace negotiation table, which through that process can hopefully arrive at a point where the conflict and the political instability that has existed between Turkey and Kurdistan is finally ended, and that the repressive conditions and the suffering of the Kurdish people is finally ended, and that they are given their right to national self-determination and national democracy for the future.
Thank you, Declan. So as we came to the end of our program, is there anything I didn't ask? Anything you would like to add on about this perspective? Please, you can have your last words.
The challenge of peace is incredibly difficult, regardless of where peace processes are being built. And notwithstanding the amount of suffering that has taken place, and the Kurdish people have suffered terribly as a direct result of the denial of their national, democratic, and human rights. This makes the process complicated. It means that there is an understandable absence of trust. But enemies, former enemies, must recognize that the only way forward is by engaging in good faith, becoming partners for peace, being prepared to work together to overcome the shared challenges that will lie ahead in the future. And then, on the basis of ensuring that everyone is included at the table, that there is no exclusion, inclusion must be absolutely key, that all of the issues are placed on the table and no preconditions are put in place at all, then sharing that approach and accepting that there is a need for good faith, which can help to build the trust which is absent, and then a commitment to ensuring that when decisions are made throughout the process, incrementally, when decisions are made and timeframes are set, that those commitments and decisions must be honoured and implemented. These are the fundamental foundations for any successful peace process. And I hope that the government of Turkey can find it within its political wisdom to recognize that there is now a moment. I believe there is now a moment emerging. There is an opportunity potentially on the horizon to do something hugely important for the people of Kurdistan, a bold decision to sue for peace by this government in Turkey, and to open up an entirely new pathway, a new future for the people of Kurdistan living in coexistence on the basis of national democracy and self-determination with the people of Turkey.
Thank you, dear Declan Kearney, National Chairperson of the Sinn Féin Ireland. Thanks for joining us, and thank you for your valuable comments.